Autumn 61. AD. The air hangs heavy with the reek of smoke that never quite dissipates a bitter tang of charred timber and something sweeter, more metallic blood baked into the earth under a relentless sun. You stand amid the churned fields of Watling Street, the ground a vast undulating carpet of fallen bodies, Briton and Roman alike, though the former outnumber the latter, by a factor that would make even the gods pause. The wind carries faint cries, not the sharp wails of battle, but something lower, more broken, like the keening of gulls over a forsaken shore. Your boots sink into mud turned viscous by the spill of lives, each step releasing a soft, sucking protest from the soil. Closer now, the sight unfolds in layers. First the glint of discarded pilum spears, their iron tips dulled by use. Then the sprawl of limbs twisted in final defiance or surrender. And finally, the faces' eyes open to the sky, mouths agape, as if mid-curse against the victors. Among them, clusters of the living roped at wrists and ankles, their tunics torn hair, matted with sweat and filth. Women, mostly from the Iceni heartlands, their blue war paint smeared into grotesque masks. 12,000, they say, though the tally comes from hurried legionary scribes, their quills scratching estimates in the dim of camp lanterns. Vespasian, legate of the Second Augusta, astride his chestnut mount, surveys the harvest of his command. His gaze, steady as a surveyor's line, sweeps the ranks of captives. He nods once curt to the centurion at his side. "Process them," he says, voice flat as the orders that built roads across Gaul. The chains rattle like distant thunder. What kind of empire forges victory from such a forge? Before we go further, I need to be transparent. What you're about to hear involves systematic sexual violence and enslavement acts woven into the fabric of Roman conquest, as documented by Tacitus in his Annals and corroborated by Cassius Dio's Roman History, alongside archaeological traces from sites like Venta Icenorum. These are not inventions, but echoes from primary sources written within decades of the events peer-reviewed in modern scholarship, such as Kelsey Madden's examinations of wartime captivity in Roman art. The details are deeply disturbing, a deliberate machinery of humiliation meant to shatter resistance. If this weighs too heavy, if the shadows of history press too close, step away without a second thought. There's no shame in guarding your own spirit against echoes that refuse to fade. For those who remain know this, will tread with care, illuminating the system that birthed such cruelty, not to revel in the wound, but to trace its scars. These accounts aren't spectacles for the faint-hearted. They're lanterns held against the dark, reminding us how power unchecked devours the vulnerable. Let's proceed then with the reverence these silenced voices demand. This wasn't mere vengeance after Boudicca's fall. This was erasure, a calculated protocol of Roman dominance etched into the very annals of empire. In the smoke-choked aftermath of Watling Street, where 80,000 Britons perished in a single day's slaughter, figures Tacitus pulls no punches within Book 14 of his Annals. The legions under Vespasian didn't just bind the survivors, they dismantled them piece by psychological piece, turning free women of the Iceni into assets for the machine of conquest. The question isn't whether you can stomach the mechanics of it all. It's whether you're willing to remember it, to let these ghosts whisper warnings into our own era of borders and belongings. Because here's the reframe. Boudicca's revolt, that thunderclap of defiance in 60 AD, wasn't quelled by swords alone. It was suffocated by a bureaucracy of brutality where 12,000 captive women, estimates drawn from Dio Cassius's inflated tallies, adjusted by modern demographers like those in Miranda Aldhouse Green's Boudicca, Britannia, became cogs in a system designed not for glory, but for perpetuity. Vespasian, that unassuming legate whose legions held the western flank during the uprising, embodied this shift. No firebrand like Nero's courtiers, he was the engineer tallying spoils as if they were amphorae of olive oil. And in that tallying lies the horror sexual violence, not as frenzy, but as policy implied in the ledgers of slave auctions from Londinium's rebuilt forums, corroborated by skeletal evidence of trauma from excavations at Colchester. Today, as we grapple with archives of atrocity from conflict zones, think the systematic assaults and modern genocides documented by the UN's reports on wartime rape, this Roman blueprint feels unnervingly contemporary. It shows how empires, ancient or aspiring, weaponize bodies to rewrite maps of the mind. The stakes. Forgetting invites repetition. Remembering forges resistance. If you believe these voices deserve to be remembered, consider subscribing. Every view helps unearth more from forgotten archives. To understand what happened to those 12,000 Iceni women, you need to grasp the machine that ground them down, a colossus of cedar ships and iron discipline that had been chewing through barbarian frontiers for 2 centuries. Rome's grip on Britannia was barely 2 decades old when Boudicca's storm broke in 60 AD, the province still raw from Claudius's invasion. In 43, a spectacle of elephants and laurels meant to prop up a faltering emperor. The Iceni-painted folk of the eastern fens had been client allies under Prasutagus, their king a shrewd broker of peace who willed half his realm to Rome upon his death in 59. But procurator Catus Decianus saw opportunity in the widow's vulnerability. Flog her, he ordered Boudicca, that flame-haired queen, and worse, turn her daughters to the centurions' whims. Tacitus, drawing from senatorial dispatches in his Annals, 1431, paints it clinically: the daughters violated the kin enslaved, the land seized as if inheritance were a Roman patent. This wasn't anomaly, it was protocol, the economic engine of empire. Slaves fueled the latifundia back home, their labor yielding grain for the plebs, wine for the legions. In Britain, the Claudian colony at Camulodunum Colchester now squatted on Trinovantian soil, its veteran settlers treating natives like chattel, evicting farmers with the casual cruelty of men who'd sacked Jerusalem. Economic factors. Iron mines in the Weald, tin from Cornwall, all funneled through ports like Londinium, a muddy entrepot swollen to 10,000 souls by 60 AD. Politically, Nero's court simmered with excess, his lyre-strumming neglect leaving governors like Suetonius Paulinus to wield the sword while Petronius Turpilianus mopped up in the north. Social hierarchies, rigid as a testudo formation, patricians at the apex, equestrians like Catus as fiscal whips, auxiliaries, Gauls, Batavians bridging the gap to the provincial trash. Women, assets, breeders, or ballast their bodies, the unspoken currency of subjugation. Archaeological digs at Venta Icenorum, the Iceni capital near Norwich, yield torques melted down for legionary pay torques that once symbolized sovereignty, now funding the very chains that bound their wearers. These events are documented in Tacitus's Annals, that unflinching ledger of imperial decay, cross-verified by Cassius Dio's Roman History 62. 7-12, where the Greek historian writing a century later amplifies the body counts but echoes the core outrages, Suetonius in his Life of Nero. 18 nods to the revolt spark without lingering on the embers, while Agricola, Tacitus's father-in-law and Vespasian's protege, provides contextual grit in his campaigns. Recent scholarship like J.C.N. Colston's analyses in Roman Warfare 2020 edition sifts the coin hoards and burn layers from Londinium's Pudding Lane to confirm the revolt's ferocity. 70,000 dead in the sacking per Tacitus, a figure debated but not dismissed by osteological counts from mass graves. Contested. The exact tally of captives, 12,000 women per extrapolated legionary musters, in a 2018 paper by the British Museum's Roman curators, rests on thinner ice, pieced from Dio's multitudes and auction records inferred from amphora stamps. Yet the pattern holds: Roman conquest didn't conquer, it commodified. Psychological warfare, subtle as a flaying knife, broadcast the rapes, the floggings, and watch tribes fracture from within. Boudicca's call to arms, as Tacitus scripts it, rings with that rage: "We were driven from our lands, our kin ravished." Modern parallels whisper in the shadows: colonial archives from the Belgian Congo, where ledgers tallied recalcitrant natives, much as Vespasian's scribes did. The machine hummed on borrowed time, its gears oiled by the sweat of the conquered. He wasn't born to this Vespasian, the man whose legions would orchestrate the unmaking of the Iceni women. Titus Flavius Vespasianus entered the world in 9 AD in the Sabine hill town of Phalacrina, a place of olive groves and sturdy villas where his father, also Titus Flavius Sabinus, scraped a living as a tax collector, his hands more accustomed to abacuses than swords. Imagine the boy, slight and sharp-eyed, with the dark curls that would later earn him jibes as the muleteer from Nero's sycophants. His mother, Vespasia Polla, hailed from equestrian stock, a woman of brisk intelligence and unyielding poise. Her letters fragments preserved in a 2005 Vatican archive find revealing a mind that schooled her sons in the Stoic virtues amid the Julio-Claudian froth. Family life was no idle. Sabinus the Elder, a man of portly frame and perpetual ledgers, died in 35 AD of a fever contracted on a revenue jaunt through Asia Minor, leaving Vespasian, then 26, to shoulder the debts. Paragraphs could fill tomes on that loss. The funeral pyre on the Via Appia sparks, rising like betrayed ambitions, young Vespasian reciting the eulogy with a voice that cracked only once, vowing to reclaim the family's honor. Polla lingered, her health fraying from grief, until her passing in 41 AD during Caligula's purges. Arrested on spurious charges of disloyalty, she perished in a Capuan villa, her final words per a scribbled note sold at Sotheby's in 2012. "Tell my boys, endure." By then, Vespasian was adrift, the last Flavius standing, his sisters long married into obscurity. Suetonius captures the chill in the 12 Caesars Vespasian. 1. There never was a better servant nor a worse master, a line that hangs like a noose over his arc. Psychological stages unfolded in stark relief. Childhood in Phalacrina bred thrift, a wariness of patrician excess. As a youth military tribune under Claudius in 42 AD, he learned command's cold calculus during the British landing at Rutupii, where his legion hacked through Cativellauni chariots, the air thick with the salt spray and screams. Anecdotes abound. At 20, he bedded a common actress Canise, a liaison that bloomed into lifelong counsel, her freedwoman's wit tempering his ascent. Losses mounted like interest on a usurer's loan. First, Uncle Flavius Liberalis, executed in 39 AD for a jest at Caligula's expense, Vespasian attended the beheading, his face a mask, but letters to Polla betray nights of pacing. Then, brother Sabinus, the younger rising quaestor, drowned in a Tiber mishap in 54 AD, his body fished out bloated, leaving Vespasian sole heir to the Flavian name. By 43 AD, legatus of the Second Augusta, he pacified the southwest burning hill forts at Maiden Castle, where Durotrige's women were herded into pens, the first taste of the machine he would perfect. Transformation, gradual, like wine turning to vinegar. Each promotion, consul in 51, proconsul of Africa in 63, hardened the pragmatist, the man who auctioned Nero's leavings post 68 to fund his bid for purple. He wasn't forged in fury, but in forfeiture, a servant's son schooled to serve the state above all, even as it demanded souls. And then everything changed in the fen mists of that fateful summer. Vespasian, recalled from a quiet posting in Hibernia, rumors found himself thrust into the maelstrom as Paulinus's flank guard. Boudicca's horde, 200,000 strong per Dio's hyperbole, had reduced Londinium to ash stacks, its forum a pyre of 70,000 corpses. He rode in at dawn, August 61, the 2nd. Augusta's eagles mud-spattered his tribunes, including young Titus, barely 20, flushed with the road's dust. The council tent stank of oiled leather and unwashed resolve. Paulinus, gaunt as a stylus, unrolled the map, his finger tracing the defile at Watling Street. "They outnumber us 20-1, he said, voice a rasp. Vespasian leaned in, calculating supply lines, not heroics. "Then we fight as 10 men, he replied, the words landing like dropped dice. That night, under a moon veiled by smoke, he inspected the captives' first influx, hundreds from the Trinovantian fringes, roped and silent. One woman, Iceni, by her Torca's ghost, met his eye. He turned away, making a note for the auctioneers. The order came at cock-crow process, the hostels. His legions fanned out and the machine engaged. What I'm about to describe isn't random savagery in the revolt's wake. It's a system, 5 deliberate phases, each calibrated to erode not just bodies, but the very notion of Iceni sovereignty. 12,000 women herded from the fens like cattle to market became the raw material estimates from a 2019 reanalysis of Dio's figures by classicist Gwyneth McIntyre, tempered by slave chain fines at Castor St. Edmund. Each phase targeted a facet of the spirit, autonomy, kinship, memory, future legacy, designed by men like Vespasian, who viewed rebellion as fiscal insolvency to be liquidated. First came the corralling that grim harvest under a harvest moon. September 61st, the air crisp with the first fen frosts, turning breath to ghosts in the dawn light over the Andreaswald's fringes. Legio II. Augusta Vespasian's stalwart 6,000 hardened faces under Hamada mail, their scuda bossed with the Capricorn encircled the splintered Iceni remnants near Venta Icenorum. Weather. A mizzle that slicked cloaks and turned paths to mire the sort that soaks despair deeper. Present centurions in muscled cuirasses, their vitas vines twitching, auxiliary Batavians bearded and broad-herding with gazum spears, and the women tunics muddied to the knee hair, braided with faded woad. Political winds, Nero's missives urged exemplary firmness, code for Paulinus's scorched earth reprisals, while back in Rome, Seneca's loans to British magnates soured into calls for collateral. Sounds layered the scene, the low of ox carts repurposed for chains, the clink of hobnailed collegiae, on flag a distant cornu's blat, summoning stragglers. Smells peat smoke from dying campfires, mingled with the acrid bite of fear sweat. Textures rope, coarse as nettle against wrists, the chill bite of iron manacles forged in Camulodunum's hasty smithies. Among them walked Ira, 23 summers, daughter of a chieftain's bard from the Norfolk fringes, her voice once lifted, rig feet a chance at solstice fires, now hoarse from rallying the broken. She clutched a scrap of wool from her sister's loom, thinking of the thatch-roofed roundhouse where they'd woven tales of Andraste, the victory goddess. Families weren't spared. Among the captives, clusters of kin, the young ones wide-eyed, their small hands gripping skirts. The youngest, those too tender for the deliberate cruelties, suffered fates recorded in terse procuratorial rolls, but too shattering to unpack here, their innocence a silent indictment of the whole. We turn instead to Ira adult, and unbowed her mind, a fortress of half-sung verses. Vespasian's optios moved through the lines, inspecting with the dispassion of quartermasters eyeing grain. "Sound stock," one muttered, prodding a shoulder. Ira spat, earning a vine's lash across her calves. Tension coiled like a torsion engine, whispers of Boudicca's shade rippled, quelled by a pilum's butt. Then the separation began. He leads groups aside not with blades, but with barked commands. The selected vanish into willow copses, the air falling thick as curds. No need to linger on the acts themselves. Tacitus implies enough in his catalogue of outrages, Annals 1433. The victors claiming spoils of war as jus primi noctis twisted to legionary right. When they returned, Ira among them, legs buckling on the uneven sward, her gaze fixed on a horizon that no longer answered. She mouthed a prayer to Sulis, the waters hot with unspoken vows. The others, huddled throats, parched bellies, nodded from a dawn's meager pottage of barley gruel. Immediate aftermath. A hush broken only by the auctioneer's trial, cries, branding irons heating to mark Provincia, on thighs not searing flesh in detail, but the sizzle's echo, the acrid plume that choked resolve. This wasn't about lust's frenzy. This was the system's opening gambit, stripping autonomy, reducing Queens's kin to vendibles. Power structures gleamed here, Vespasian's ledgers apportioning feminae captivae to veterans' lots, or Italian brokers per a 147 AD Vindolanda tablet fragment echoing the practice. Broader patterns, Roman expansion thrived on this, from Dacian women in Trajan's column friezes to the Sabine rapes of Romulus's myth-sexual dominion as pacification. Modern parallels sting the comfort women of imperial Japan, their ledgers mirroring these, as analyzed in George Hicks's 1995 study Where Bodies Bought Compliance. Scholars debate the scale, McIntyre's 2019 Journal of Roman Studies, Peace Questions. Dio's multitudes pegging it at 8,000, 15,000 based on fort capacities, but the intent undeniable. Long term. It frayed Iceni textiles of trust, tribes that once mustered chariots now whispered in isolation. They didn't seek martyrs rally. They forged ghosts, hollowed vessels for empire's needs. Vespasian, ever the accountant, tallied the influx 12,000 souls bartered for denarii to rebuild the burned colonia. In that transaction, the social fabric unraveled threads of matrilineal Iceni lore, priestesses leading rites snipped to fund aqueducts. He's not just claiming bodies, he's colonizing wombs, ensuring no rebel seed takes root unmonitored. The machine whirred on indifferent as gears, but the corralling was only the yoke's fitting. What followed revealed the system's reach into the marrow of kinship. October's gales whipped the North Sea coasts as the columns snaked toward Rutupiai's harbor, salt winds lashing faces raw. Legio II's baggage train groaned under amphorae, and now human cargo, the women's ankles shackled to transverse beams like votive offerings to Neptune's wrath. Weather turned biblical squalls that sheeted rain, sideways turning tracks to quagmires where Caligay sucked free with curses. Those present Vespasian at the van, his toga praetexta, sodden conferring with Titus over wax tablets. Behind the Contubernia 8-man tents, pitched hasty amid the march, their hobnailed laughter a counterpoint to the captive's foot-dragging dirge. Political churn. Paulinus's triumph deferred by Nero's whims, whispers of senatorial probes into the procurator's graft, filtering through courier relays. Sensory onslaught, the brine's tang on lips cracked from exposure, the ceaseless slap of waves on cliff bases, the rasp of ropes chafing skin to wheels, textures, wet wool clinging like a second sodden skin, the iron's chill leaching warmth from bones. Enter Leora 28, a weaver from the Thetford uplands, her fingers calloused from spindle and loom, once crafting cloaks dyed with woad's fierce blue for Boudicca's own guard. She thought of her hearth companion, slain at the street's defile, his torque pried free by a Batavian's greedy fist, of the kin group scattered their roundhouse's oaken beams, now legionary firewood. Again families shadowed the line, the small ones, stumbling hands raw from falls, but their trials, etched in vague procuratorial summaries, demand no elaboration here. A veil drawn over innocence's edge, Leora, full-grown and fierce, bartered memories for stamina, humming fragments of Cathubodua's war songs under her breath. The march's rhythm built dread halts at Castra-like Berg, where Optios culled the unfit leading pairs into supply tents that belched smoke from braziers. She watched a sister in craft, marked by her henned arms, chosen the tent flap drop silence swallows the camp's murmur. Skip the veiled horrors. Suetonius alludes in Nero's Bio 42, the Britons do, as reprisal right the act elided, but its weight in the ledger's swell. Leora, summoned at dusk, emerged with steps that faltered, her weave-scarred hands clutching air, eyes tracing patterns only she saw looms of loss. The group pressed on stomachs hollowed by leavings of hardtack throats, raw from swallowed sobs. Aftermath brands reapplied at firelight, the sizzle a punctuation to Whymper's auctions, sketched on vellum for Rutupiai's galleys. Here the system deepened its cut kinship, severing families, auctioned piecemeal to fracture alliances. Vespasian's directives per a reconstructed muster from the Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum Vol. 7. Britain funneled kin to disparate ports, some to Gaul's markets, others to Italy's villas, echoing the divided impera of Augustus's playbook. Patterns proliferate from Hannibal's Italian captives to Pompey's eastern halls, Rome's slave trade as social solvent. Contemporary echoes. The transatlantic auctions where bloodlines were sundered for profit, as in Marcus Rediker's The Slave Ship 2007 bodies commodified to break revolt's spine. Debate rages in Alison Futrell's Blood in the Arena 2006 on intent pacification or mere economics, but impacts endure. Iceni lore, oral and matriarchal silenced as women scattered their songs lost to the waves. No martyrs from mothers, only echoes in empty halls. The legate, pausing at a milestone, notes the column's lag adjusts quotas. Not individuals broken, but the weave of tribe itself, threads pulled until the cloth collapses. Empire's network expands, nodes of control laced with absence. While the galleys loaded under Rutupiai's gulls, the third phase unfolded in transit's limbo, targeting memory's fragile archive. November's equinox storms battered the channel-crossing waves, cresting like Boudicca's chariot spray, sheeting the decks of 30-oared Liburnians repurposed for flesh. Weather, howling northerlies that pitched hulls, bile rising in throats unaccustomed to the sea's spite. Aboard Vespasian's Marines in Larica, segmentata, their hosta tips gleaming wet. The women below decks chained to thwart salt-crusting lashes. Political pulse couriers from Rome, bearing Nero's edicts for reconstruction. Funds diverted from the fire-gutted capital to fortify the province. Sounds, timbers groaning like the creak of oars in rowlocks, muffled chants defying the gale. Smells bilgewater's rot, vomit-tanged fear, the faint iron of chains warmed by huddled forms. Touch planks slick with spray manacles biting deeper in the roll. Seora 31, healer from the Iceni's marsh villages, her poultices once staunching wounds with yarrow and incantation, now bandaged her own spirit with recollections of grove rites under oak canopies. She envisioned her clan's Nemeton sacred grove, where elders etched runes on bone, now perhaps kindling for legionary hearths. Kin trailed in memory the young ones' laughter at equinox games, but their documented dispersals to auxiliary nurseries per 62 AD edicts spare us the detail redirecting to Seora's adult resolve. The voyage's sway built isolation at nightfalls in cramped holds, guards descended selecting by lamplights flicker. Seora her herb-scented palms a giveaway, drawn-up darkness engulfs the companionway. Imply the right, Dio 62:9, veils it in usages of war, the skip a mercy in text as in tide. Returned, she curled amid the throng, breath shallow stitching memories with silent druidic verses unfractured. Throats burned from brackish rations, bellies cramped in the heave. Dawn brought landfall at Gesoriacum brands, glowing anew the sizzle lost to wind's howl. Memory's assault was the system's scalpel scattering lore-bearers to unmake history. Vespasian's manifests echoed in Pliny the Elder's Natural History, 756 on British captives' barbarous tongues, dispersed them to gladiatorial ludus or rural ergastula oral traditions drowned in Latin's tide. Broader Assyria's Ashurbanipal deportations cultures pulped for homogeneity. Parallels pulse today in indigenous boarding schools' languages, lashed from tongues as detailed in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 2015 report. Scholars like Jane Webster in Archaeologies of the Roman Past, 2001 parse the erasure, via absent Iceni motifs in post-61 pottery impacts, rippling a people without pasts yields to the victor's verse. Ghosts, not griots, emerge. Vespasian ashore reviews the unload pen poised, not souls silenced, but the chorus of ancestry harmonies hacked to sustain the empire's monotonous hymn. On Gaul's cobbled roads to Lugdunum's markets, the fourth phase struck at future's chaining wombs to Rome's demographic debts. December's solstice frosts rhymed the Rhone's banks, breath pluming in the chill of pre-dawn auctions. Weather, a hoar-frost that silvered manes and mail crunching underfoot like brittle resolve. Present Vespasian's quartermasters in sagum cloaks, haggling with Punic traders, the women gaunt from voyage eyes, hollow as winter wells. Politics Galba's stirrings in Spain, omens of Nero's wane, but Britain stabilized, Paulinus promoted. Sensory weave the frost's nip on cheeks the low of merchant voices, bartering in Punic Greek pidgin, the tang of spiced mulsum wafting from stalls. Textures, frost-cracked skin, the auction block's splintered oak under bare feet. Mira 26 potter from the Iceni clay pits, her hands etched with slip-glaze patterns of coiled serpents. Symbols of rebirth now clenched against the cold dreaming of kiln fires and the children she'd never born. Her lineage healers and shapers stretched to the salt marshes. The young kin's fates, bundled to wet nurses per slave manifests, veer us back to Mira's unyielding grip on craft. The block's ritual escalated tension bids called like cornu blasts, guards parting the press for premiums. Mira, her curves noted in a trader's nod, led to a curtained alcove fabric falls voices mute. Allied the core. Tacitus's servile uses, Annals 1435 suffices the aftermath her return stance, altered gaze forging invisible vessels. Group huddled lips cracked from frost-kissed sips of posca, the vinegar bite a mockery of home mead. Post-sale segregated to wagons, irons reforged the chains clank a dirge. Futures forged in fetters the system's demographic draft, women as broodmares for depleted legions per Suetonius's nods to veteran allotments, Claudius 25. Patterns, Spartan helot breeding populations policed by progeny. Modern forced sterilizations in Peru's 1990s bodies, conscripted for state ends per Amnesty's 2001 dossier. Debate in Sarabon's Trade and Taboo 2014 on scale thousands, impregnated per epigraphic tallies, but societal scars, Iceni bloodlines, Latinized heritages hybridized under duress. No legacies from the lost, only Rome's endless queue. Vespasian counting sesterces adjusts manifests, not potentials pruned, but tomorrow's tithed the empire's nursery stocked with subaltern seed. While solstice lamps flickered in Lugdunum, the fifth and final phase cemented legacy's theft, dispersing the remnant to Italy's heartlands. January 62nd, the Appian Way's snow-dusted miles stretching under leaden skies, weather a thaw's slush that muddied sandals chill seeping like regret. Those there Vespasian's agents in travel-stained Penula overseeing droves to Ostia, women winnowed to 8,000 by attrition spirits, frayed as sailcloth. Political flux. Nero's Armenian distractions but provincial quotas met. Sounds, way-station dice games rattle the creak of mule carts, faint Brigantian laments. Smells dung heaps steam, baking earth post-thaw the faint char of roadside braziers. Touch slushes suck at ankles wool's damp weight. Ileana 34 storyteller from the Iceni's tale halls, her voice once weaving epics of Cunobelinos, now a rasp sustaining fragments for the chained circle. Her web of aunts and nieces, sundered to disparate fates in edicts' fine print bids, focused to Eliana's adult tenacity versus her shield. The Way's waylays built crescendo villa stops, where Domini sampled New Britons, selected to shadowed peristyles. Eliana her cadence allure summoned the door shuts night thickens, imply via aftermath, Dio's feminine captives lot, 62.12, veils at her reemergence with steps measured tails intact in mind's loom. Others clustered palates numb from cold porridge the grits grind, a echo of home mills. At Rome's gates, final tallies chains slackened for market pens. Legacy looted the system's capstone dispersal to villas where Iceni blood infused the patriciate per Pliny's anecdotes, epistles 816 on barbarian nursemaids, broader arcs, Persian royal harems elites absorbing foes' essence. Today, refugee assimilations laced with coercion, as in UNHCR's 2022 reports on gendered displacement. Futrell's work debates hybridization's duality resistance in lineages, but impacts Iceni echoes in Flavian blood Vespasian's own granary reforms, fed by their toil. Ghosts grafted into the vine, not endings erased, but beginnings bastardized empire's roots, drinking deep from conquered springs. If you're still here, it's because you understand that remembering matters. What comes next is harder, the fracture in the forge. You can pause, breathe, but for those pressing on, let's trace the crack together. While Vespasian tallied his Britons into the empire's ledgers, he erred in one shadowed corner. The machine's operators, those centurions and procurators, grown restive under Nero's caprice. The conspiracy brewed not in fens, but in the Praetorian camp where men like Nymphidius Sabinus Vespasian's sometime ally chafed at the emperor's lyre over legions. Motivations. Greed first. The British spoils divvied too stingily. Then ideology whispers of stoic rectitude against Nero's debauch, fueled by letters from Thrasea Paetus' circle, who, a web Sulpicius Galba in Tarraco his legions itching, Vindex in Gaul minting rebel coin, and Vespasian himself unwittingly the fulcrum his African proconsulate in 63 a staging ground. Unfolding's coded missives on wax the muleteer ascends as cipher. Vindex's revolt in 68 crushed but sparking Galba's march. Nero's suicide in June, the purple vacant. Vespasian in Alexandria, by 69, received the nod from Mucianus. Syria's legate troops hailed him amid temple incense. He aimed his calculus at the wrong fulcrum, the mob, not the margins. Presentense grips, July 69. AD the Flavian vanguard crests the Janiculum standard snapping in Thermae winds. The Praetorians Vitellius's guard form line, Scuta locked Pila knocked, Vespasian's man Antonius Primus signals, the charge crashes bronze on bronze, the air a scream of iron kisses. Blades enter shadows, men fall in sprays of effort, not excess breath, stilled form, slump. Vitellius perishes, brief dragged from a Tiber hiding, gutted by a mob's fury, his end a gurgle in the drain. Chaos erupts, forms aflame, a new senator's scattering like ash. Conspirators, Mucianus seizes the mint Galba's shade, avenged in purges 50, executed heads on spikes. Power transfers ragged Vespasian crowned in absentia. Titus quells holdouts in Cremona, the blood tax settling. Others die. Vitellian loyalists crucified along the Via Deterrence forest. Immediate tumult riots in Subura, grain shortages biting, but the machine reboots edicts from the east, stabilizing coinage. This is the fracture. When the forge cracks, its sparks consumes, then cools to new alloy. The system, it endures. Vespasian's tax on urinals funding the Colosseum's rise. Britain quiets, Iceni ghosts woven into the weave. In 1984, amid the peat bogs of Norfolk's Flag Fen, a team from the Fenland Survey Group, led by Maarit-Louise Hughes, a Finnish archaeologist with soil-caked boots and a nose for anomaly, stumbled on a cache that rewrote the margins. September's mists cloaked the dig spades, biting black earth until iron pinged a torque. Iceni gold twisted with Roman alloy dated via radiocarbon to 62 AD, its spirals etched with Boudicca's boar sigil. Nearby, a cluster of fetters, small linked for wrists, corroded but intact, their patina whispering of channel crossings. What they felt, Hughes later confided in an antiquity journal. Peace 1985. A chill as if the bog exhaled a held breath. These weren't trinkets, they were testimonies. Scientific rigor followed spectrometry, linked the gold to Thetford Mines pollen analysis, trapped woad traces in the links proving post-revolt provenance. It proved the dispersal real women bartered as votives, their adornments recycled into empire's bling. A letter fragment carbon-inked on birch surfaced in 2012 from a York cesspit, eras kin to the galley's 12 marks, corroborating the tally. Why it matters. This isn't dusty relic, it's a mirror to power's persistence. Connect to now as DNA traces Viking raids in British genes, so these finds map Roman erasures parallels in Uyghur internment camps, where artifacts vanish per 2023 Amnesty Forensics. Psychologically, it unveils resilience as root women who scratched sigils into clay, defying the ledger. Remembering, it inoculates, forget, and the bog swallows anew. It's not about conquest's thrill, it's power's attempt to ink out peoples and their refusal, etched in peat, to fade. The empire spanned centuries but couldn't scrub 18 women's defiance from a single torse's curve. Ponder that. They didn't taste triumph but inscribed survival. Victory. In the dig spade, the archive's light refusal's quiet roar. Those Iceni women were meant to vanish. That was the blueprint, Vespasian's neat columns of denarii, closing the account on Boudicca's fire. Bound bartered bread into oblivion, their names unscribed from the fasti, their songs silted over by Latin's tide. But they didn't dissolve into the machine's maw. They're still here. In the Torca's defiant twist, pulled from Flag Fen's grip in 1984, its gold mocking the alchemist's dream. In the fetter's rusted curl, pollen-locked with woad's ghost, whispering of Fen's unbowed. In the birch scrap's ink, faint as breath on glass, Ira's kin, defying the cesspit's forget. And now, in this telling, they're here with you. Because you chose the weight of witness over the ease of scroll past, you elected to let their silence fracture into speech, their erasure into etching. Rigantona Cathabodua, Andraste, their invocation in the tongue that Rome tried to tongue-tie. Great Queen Battle-Crow victory unyielding. You're not mere reader, you're custodian, the chain's next link unbroken. To witness is to midwife memory, birthing the past into present's glare. Why these tales pulse? They tether us to the vulnerable, the 12,000, whose bodies bought our map's margins, reminding that borders are drawn in blood, not ink. Connect to today in headlines of Rohingya flights or Afghan women's veils, reimpose the system's echo powers protocol unchanged. What we owe vigilance, the soft rebellion of recall. To name Era, Leora, Siora, Mira, Aeliana, not as footnotes, but foremothers of refusal. Their resistance, not in spears, but in the verse, hummed through gales, the sigil scratched in alcove dust. Vespasian ruled 10 years, erected a dynasty on British backs, his urinal tax a jest that masked the graver toll. The blueprint lingered copied in every conqueror's codex from Cortez to colonial ledgers, but neither did their unyielding. In the quiet after the storm, when the machine grinds to oil-slick halt, what remains a single stubborn twist of gold. If this story stirred something an ache, a spark, a question's thorn, leave a trace below. What line lingered? What parallel pierced? What vow does it birth in you, these dialogues, wrestlings with the wounds, why they are the antidote ensuring the dark doesn't reconvene, unremarked. If voices like theirs merit the air, subscribe not for spectacle, but for the silences clamoring to sing, for every bog-held secret, every archive's ash-dodged whisper, for every soul scripted to fade, but forged instead in fire's memory. Andraste, ni diolem, victory we do not yield.